Inwards is in a bit of an odd place when it comes to my attempts to writing a review for it. As the very first mod I did for Cool Mods back when I rebooted the series, it is now the only mod I have showcased on the channel that does not yet have a review, excluding unfinished mods, Black Mesa. Honestly, when I came back for Cool Mods years ago now, I didn't exactly put a ton of forethought into what mod I would come back with. Inwards was featured not because it was the greatest mod I had seen at the time, but because it happened to show up in my ModDB search and I thought it looked interesting. It's not a fantastic mod, is the gist of what I'm trying to say here, and that, coupled with its non-standard gameplay, has made it an oddity, one that I wasn't sure how or even if I wanted to tackle for a review. But I've put it off long enough. So, here are my thoughts on this obscure little mod. So, as I said before, Inwards is pretty different in its gameplay style from the usual mods we see in the Source engine. It's somewhat similar to Dear Esther in that it doesn't feature combat, but instead tries to tell an atmospheric story by guiding you through the mod's environment and feeding you pieces of a written story. It's a walking simulator. Unlike Dear Esther, this mod is not voice acted, instead opting to tell its story through a series of notes which you can find scattered throughout the world. It also incorporates some thriller elements by placing a few enemies in the world with which you have to avoid in order to survive. When it comes to incorporating these elements into a cohesive game though, Inwards is far from the highly praised Dear Esther. Even after playing the mod multiple times, which is easy to do because it is incredibly short, I found it difficult to get a grasp on the story. It's simply not a memorable experience, and when you nix gameplay and attempt to tell a story, as walking simulators do, you need a compelling story. I also don't understand how the environment, and even more critically, the enemies, factor into the story. I feel like I could simply read the notes and remove it from the game entirely and not miss anything. Speaking of the environment, the second most important thing for a walking simulator to have after a good story is environmental detail. Mods that stick to first-person action or puzzle-like gameplay can often get a pass on lackluster environmental detail, because you are most frequently going to be so engaged in that gameplay that the environment becomes totally secondary in your mind. This is not the case for this type of game, however. There is nothing else for your eyes to focus on here besides the environments, which means you absolutely need to pour a ton of detail into them. Inwards has mediocre level design at best. To avoid using the Dear Esther comparison again, take a look at Firewatch as an example of excellent, eye-catching environments in a walking simulator. Every detail is polished. Every nook and cranny of the limited level space is absolutely breathtaking to behold. In a game where there's really nothing else to occupy you besides looking at the world around you, this is the quality of level design that you need. The sound department ends up in a similar situation. Ambient music is simply lacking. This is another part of the game that needs to be ramped up for a walking simulator, yet Inwards doesn't effectively utilize it. All in all, Inwards doesn't have any markedly bad traits. The problem lies in the genre that the mod occupies being more demanding on the traditionally artistic points of game design. When your mind is occupied by gunning down Combine Overwatch, environments and music go mostly unnoticed, serving as a backdrop to the much more critical mental processes of staying alive. When you remove such taxing gameplay from the equation, the mind relaxes, and is able to take in other details that your senses pick up on. If you fail to make eye-catching scenery and ear-catching audio, a walking simulator simply cannot work. This is to say nothing of the actual story being told, which is of course the most important thing in this genre, and another aspect of Inwards that just falls short of creating an engrossing artistic experience. That's all for this mod review. Like and subscribe for more. But, in the meantime, this is where I get off.